Coming up down the Leipzig Loko, with Lokomotive Leipzig we take on two of the fellow form teams in the Bundesliga off the back of the winter break in Borussia Mönchengladbach and Bayern Munich. Plus, we've already signed a player in the January transfer window. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 94 of the Leipzig Loko with Lokomotive Leipzig here on Sean Does FM. I hope you are doing well and coming up today. A bit of a transfer update and also our first two games back as we look to keep ourselves in a top 4 position in the Bundesliga. We take on Borussia Mönchengladbach, currently down in 6th, and off the back of that we host Bayern Munich on top of the Bundesliga table. So if you're looking forward to all of that coming up in today's episode, then do remember to go down below, leave a thumbs up on the video, and if you haven't done so already and have been enjoying the series here on the channel, also consider hitting that subscribe button and turning that notification bell on as well. It is greatly appreciated. But off the back of yesterday's episode, where we did play a couple of games back in December, we had a few to go off the back of that before we did hit that winter break, but we took on Freiburg and Dynamo Dresden in the Bundesliga. If you missed that one, I'll leave a link to it over in the top right corner. As I said off the back of that, we did have 3 more games. One of those was in the Europa League and 2 were in the Bundesliga, and thankfully picked up very comfortable wins in all of those games, of course, off the back of that red card that we did get in that game against Dynamo Dresden. Worth noting as well, Palu Alte is actually still serving a suspension in the Bundesliga that did get extended, as we did anticipate, with that big spinning elbow out of the UFC. But we started off well with a 3-1 win over Lokomotive Plovdiv. This was a game that for a while it did just feel like the luck wasn't going to go away. In the first 20 or so minutes, we had about 8 shots in this game that came off the post. Thankfully, at the 25-minute mark, Justin Blomier did put one away from set piece, albeit just before halftime, they did score with their first attack of the game. But thankfully, shortly off the back of that, Andrew Pittman grabbed a goal, and late on, it was Matthias Tell off of the bench to a good 3-1 win there, which does mean we are starting to get into a position where we can maybe make our way into the top 8 of the Europa League, with games coming up this month later on against Qarabag as well as Anderlecht. If we can win both of those games, as you can see, that might just get us far enough up the table that we can skip that first knockout playoff round. Otherwise, we should be in that now, 4 points clear of the teams who are on the verge of that. And with that next game coming up looking quite winnable, I'd like to think we're as good as through to the knockouts of the Europa League. And off the back of that, 2 games in the Bundesliga, and these performances very impressive. And also Nicolo Amadori continuing his resurgence in form. First up, we took on Hertha Berlin. These guys were actually bottom of the Bundesliga off the back of that Dynamo Dresden draw, and Amadori scored a hat-trick to give us a 3-0 win. And then against Werder Bremen, another team who are struggling in the league this season, of course being promoted from the 2 Bundesliga last season, we picked up a 4-0 win, goals again to Amadori, but this time also Zorlan with a double. Off the back of that, he did win the European Golden Boy Awards. That's worth noting going in to the start of 2031, and also Mikhail Mastis, nice and early in that second half, gave us that big lead. Some very good results off the back of yesterday's episode, and to be fair, ever since we did go back to that Gegenpress with a slightly lower tempo, and also those role changes to our defence and what it means for the Bundesliga table going into our first couple of games back from the winter break, we are just inside of a Champions League qualifying spot, albeit Wolfsburg behind us do have a game in hand, so that's something that we do need to consider. But behind that, we're 2 points clear of our first opposition in today's episode, and even further back, Eintracht Frankfurt, they are 5 points behind us, and they've also played 1 extra game somehow, so in quite a good position in the Bundesliga to get into Europe somehow for next season. Hopefully we might be able to hold on to a top 4 spot, albeit we're probably at the moment more likely to be making the Europa League again, with Wolfsburg having that game in hand. But a couple of other things have happened since we have moved forward into the January transfer window. A bit of squad news, because one of our players has announced that he is going to retire come the end of the season, and off the back of that, he also picked up an injury. It was Leroy Sané. He decided to retire because he wasn't featuring in our first choice 11, which is obviously because he was just coming off the back of a previous injury, which was his broken ribs that kept him out for 2 months. He then played in a friendly before he came back against the Go Ahead Eagles, and he dislocated his shoulder, so he'll be out for another couple of months. So to be fair, Leroy Sané not going to feature too much for us for the next couple of months, just like was the case before that winter break, which is a bit disappointing because he's definitely our best right wing option. But off the back of him announcing his retirement, and even before he suffered that dislocated shoulder in that game against the go-ahead Eagles, I did have a look at the right wing options that were on my shortlist over in the transfer centre, and did find someone at 18 years old who I thought might just be good enough and that we could afford, who could come in and replace Leroy Sané in our squad next season. So we have already dipped in to the transfer market, and thankfully we did, obviously, with that dislocated shoulder, because that has proven to be a quite smart bit of business with that in mind. But as I said at the time, didn't actually realise that was going to happen. We have made the one signing in the January transfer window, and it was, once we can find it, for Mislav Janko Spaljak. He is out of Dynamo Zagreb. It's another Croatian, just like Kuseta, who we signed from Everton in the summer transfer window. But here's a right winger that we only paid £1 million for up front, but the deal is going to rise to around about 4.5 million, but 3-star current ability, and he might have 5-star potential. 4 of that is gold, and a couple of his attributes are very nice indeed. He's got some good ones there in dribbling technique, aggression, determination, work rate, as well as agility. So I think for that right wing role, that inside forward that we do use on support, he could end up being a very good purchase for not much. At 18 years old, that does mean in a couple of years' time, he will become homegrown nation and homegrown club as well. And as you can see, his value has shot up off the back of that transfer that we did make a couple of good seasons there at Dynamo Zagreb before we did pinch him halfway through this one. Hopefully he can continue those good average ratings that he has been getting since making his way into the first team there at Dynamo Zagreb. So that's what we've done in the transfer market. As I said, it actually worked out quite well with that injury that Leroy Sané did pick up. And hopefully we can continue what has been a very good run of form in the Bundesliga. We haven't actually lost a Bundesliga game despite all our technical changes since way back in early September when we did take on Schalke. So hopefully that can continue, albeit we start to take on some tougher teams. And of course, this was the patch right at the start of the season where we were really struggling, and that's why we did move away from the Gegenpress. As you can see, we lost to Bayern and picked up a draw against Gladbach in our first 2 games of the season. Hopefully we'll get a few more points out of today's episode, albeit both of these teams do come into this in some very good form. Borussia Mönchengladbach before the winter break, 5 straight wins. They are definitely one of the form teams at the moment in the Bundesliga, and certainly doing a lot better than they have in recent years in the Bundesliga. And off the back of that, we'll take on Bayern Munich, who off the back of a little bit of a scratchy start are now back to the usual position on top of the Bundesliga, and by quite a comfortable margin as well of 8 points, albeit a couple of teams behind them in Dortmund and RB Leipzig do have a couple of games in hand, but some tricky games coming up for us in today's episode. But hopefully we can pick up at least a couple of points from these games, especially that second one as it is at home, albeit that might be a bit tricky against Bayern Munich, albeit they are still in the DFB Pokal, so that might take their attention away just a little bit. Of course, we are already out of that competition, but first up, it is Borussia Mönchengladbach, albeit we are dealing with another injury, not just Leroy Sané going into this one. Value Alte, he is out with a twisted ankle, albeit that's actually not too bad because he would have been suspended for this game considering that big spinning elbow he did deliver in yesterday's episode. So our injuries, not too bad off the back of that transfer that we did make for our new Croatian right winger, and also, of course, considering Alte would not have been available anyway, not too bad off with those injuries considering those factors. But we have still been forced into one other change, that is that Billy Camillo comes in for Hurtado because he is also suspended for this first game of today's episode, having picked up 2 many yellow cards in the Bundesliga. So it does mean in terms of our centre-back options on the bench, we pretty much don't have any, so hopefully no issues there at the back in this first game of today's episode. Also, our new signing might make his debut off the bench, of course, with Sané injured. Mastis is still starting on the right wing. Was hopeful that Leroy Sané would be back for these games off the back of that break, but obviously that injury he picked up in our loan friendly does mean that is not going to be an option, and also might mean we don't register him for the next couple of league phase games in the Europa League as well, albeit that might be dependent on the homegrown nation situation that we do have here at Lokomotive Leipzig. That was one of the key reasons why we did sign him, but there were Borussia Mönchengladbach. They are going with a 4-4-2, and there's our team as we ran through before. Hopefully, our European golden boy in Zoran, and also our informed striker in Nicolo Amadori can deliver, and we can pick up a good result. Now 10 minutes in, a free kick here. Matthias Tell puts it far post, and Nicolo Amadori continues his good goal scoring form at the far post. It's another header. As we know of him, that is usually his prime method of scoring, and that's a very nice header as well, just sneaking that one inside the far post. And it's a brilliant start, only 10 minutes in, and we take a 1-0 lead away from home against the Borussia Mönchengladbach team, who have won all of their last 5 games in the Bundesliga. And it looks like here we are getting off to quite a good start, coming up to the 20-minute mark and still holding that 1-0 lead. Borussia Mönchengladbach actually haven't done anything so far in this game. Hopefully that can continue. We'll praise the boys because it has been a very good start. Now thrown in a dangerous area of the field, albeit Pittman unfortunately can't link up with Escobar, and now Zvonarek does get them on the attack here for Borussia Mönchengladbach. They now find their Buonanni. He gets in behind our defence, and that is such a frustrating goal to concede. We should have been on the attack down the other end, but a poor throw between Pittman and Escobar, and just like that, 2 players there absolutely do us. Buonanni still had a lot of work to do, but too much pace there for both Sika and Camillo down our right-hand side. Not good work there from our defence in a number of ways. The throw-in, and then as they try and stop the Borussia Mönchengladbach attack, and just like that, it is 1-1. Hopefully, not a quick fire double here, or we can get back in front, because that is a very frustrating goal to concede. Would have thought there would have been a better option there than trying to find Escobar, but now that's given Borussia Mönchengladbach a bit of a lift off the back of a rough start in this game, and they have the ball here. Zvonarek plays one forward for Canelo. He puts that one in behind, and it is a goal yet again for Borussia Mönchengladbach, and a poor couple of minutes there for us off the back of what had been a really good start in this game, and it has not gone well off the back of taking that 1-0 lead. Zvonarek is carving us apart, and Camelo, he gets in behind this time Osvaldo, so that's our other centre-back. That does not look like it's going too well today. Actually, off the back of that, might just switch our centre-backs, because Camillo last season was playing on that left-hand side, but a poor couple of minutes there. We undo our good work from earlier through that Amadori goal from a set piece, and we are 2-1 down, but overall more shots in this game. But unfortunately, Borussia Mönchengladbach have done us a couple of times now on the counter-attack. Now Musties, we are finally back in position. Blomé on the edge of the box plays that one to Escobar. We might take our time a little bit more, of course, these days with that slightly lower tempo with this gegenpress style. Now Zordan tries to play through the Matthias Tell. Big chance one-on-one with Mantel in goal for Borussia Mönchengladbach, but unfortunately that's a good save from their goalkeeper. A big chance for us there to get this back to all square going into halftime, but unfortunately those couple of minutes around the half-hour mark do mean that we are 2-1 behind here and in danger of losing our first game back from the winter break. Now Andrew Pittman is on a 6.3, so obviously he'll come off for run, and also Mikhail Mastis not doing well, so we'll give our new signing in Mislav Janko-Spelyak some game time in the second half, see what he's all about. Hopefully can prove quite a useful addition to our squad here off the back of that injury to Leroy Sané. To be fair, if Sané did not get injured, we probably would have been keeping Spelyak in our under-18s, and he would have made the step up going in to next season. And first highlight here in the second half, he does make a good challenge, albeit Borussia Mönchengladbach do keep the ball, but hopefully we can find a way to get something out of this game. It would be a frustrating result, this one, if it was just a couple of minutes of poor work that did cost us. Cancelleri there with a good chance at the far post, but thankfully from a tight angle, that one does hit the post or the side netting. But now Borussia Mönchengladbach are actually on the front foot in this game, coming up to the hour mark, and we are still 2-1 behind. We'll just check here on some player ratings and player fitness, but to be fair, most of our guys are still doing a decent enough job out there, so I don't think we need to make any changes just yet, albeit Ricardo San Jose on a 6.4, but not keeping a goalkeeper on the bench. That's a bit of a waste of time in Football Manager usually. But coming up to the last 20 minutes, and we're just checking again on some player fitness. Still, everyone out there is doing a decent job, so I think we'll continue yet again and maybe make some changes going in to the last 15 minutes, albeit we might chuck some more players on some more positive duties and see if that will help us get back into this game and lock things up, and only going forward a few minutes later. And now might be the time to make some changes. Spelyak has picked up a yellow card, but of course not worth taking him off, having only just come on. But Blomier is on a 6.6, so I think Manuel will bring on for him, and also will bring on Calvochin for Sicker, just seeing who else might be worth bringing on off of the bench here. Probably a debate here between the likes of Pimentel, Zirkzee and Musa, and Zoran's only going okay. We might give Carlos Pimentel some game time, but play him as a shadow striker. And off the back of trying to make those substitutions, there is a highlight that is taking place. Only 15 minutes left for us to try and get a draw out of this game. We hold the ball here at the back. Escobar plays that one forward to Zoran. Tries to play a ball over the top there for Spalyak on debut. That goes into touch. That's just a meaningless highlight before those substitutions that we are trying to make can go through. But about to make our way into the last 10 minutes of this game, and unfortunately still behind, so it's time for us now to up the tempo, go a little bit wider, and also put our fullbacks both onto attack. And also we might just try and do some floated crosses to see if that could be a way to get Amadori a chance to score another goal. To be fair, that's something I have considered, but we are playing quite well even without that instruction, so we'll see if it does anything in a situation where we are behind. This time looking for Spalyak. He puts that one over the bar, a chance there for a big debut goal, but unfortunately not really the player that we were looking for from that situation. Ideally we'd be going for Amadori. We're making our way now into a very brief period of injury time. We went attacking too late, and unfortunately it's our first defeat in the Bundesliga since all the way back in early September. He actually played fairly well in that game, but just that poor period off the back of that throw, which should have been in a very good position for us, but Pittman gives the ball away looking for Escobar, and then Borussia Mönchengladbach. A quick fire doubles. Vonadek had a very good game in those couple of minutes, and unfortunately we do suffer a defeat, albeit that was going to be a tricky game. These ones that we do have off the back of the winter break could be tricky as they were come the start of the season. It also means we drop down the table quite considerably as Gladbach do jump above us, and also Wolfsburg off the back of a 1-0 win over FC Cologne. So unfortunately we dropped down the table a little bit off the back of our first defeat in a while away at Borussia Mönchengladbach. Hopefully we can try and keep ourselves in a European spot when we come back to take on Bayern Munich. So a bit of a frustrating result in that first game back from the winter break, a 2-1 defeat. Didn't mind the second goal they scored, but it probably came off the back of the first one. That throw from Andrew Pittman trying to look for Escobar. That is quite a frustrating way to concede goals on Football Manager this season, and now we need to try and bounce back against top of the table Bayern Munich these days. Only 5 points clear of RB Leipzig, and to be fair, RB Leipzig do have 2 games in hand, so we could kind of do RB Leipzig another favour here, of course, after we kind of helped them get into Europe this season by winning the Conference League after our win in the DFB Pokal. So we're kind of doing the opposite of what we should be in this save. We should be trying to stuff them up, not help them out, but we could do the same again here if we can take some points off of Bayern Munich. As you can see, our record against these guys of late, not too good. The only green dot, I believe, was that win in the DFB Pokal final last season, which was on penalties, but they did beat us at the start of the season. But with this one being at home, hopefully we can pick up a decent result. And since we came back for the start of today's episode, 2 wins over Fortuna Dusseldorf, both quite comprehensive, especially in that third round of the DFB Pokal. But hopefully they might have their eye on some upcoming Champions League games as well, so might just put out a slightly rotated team for this game. Unfortunately as well, we've got a few more injuries to deal with for this one. Sane and Altay still unavailable, but also Osvaldo has picked up a type 5, so it means he is not going to be featuring in this game. So it means that Camillo will keep his place in the first team. Hurtado makes his way back in place of our Brazilian wonder kid centre back, and also Manuel on the bench, a twisted knee. So it means we're a little bit light in terms of our defensive midfield options going into this one. There you can see the other results on this match day. Thankfully, still in that Europa League qualifying spot. We'll see what happens off the back of this game, because if we do suffer a heavy defeat, then Schalke could go above us with that goal differential. But as I said, a bit of a tricky start off the back of the winter break. Hopefully we can pick something up from this game at home. But fair to say that is unexpected, just that one change as we ran through before Hurtado comes in for Osvaldo. Bit of a jumbled up bench as well, with the lack of centre-back options, and also in defensive midfield as well, James Baker, our only option. It does mean that maybe Calvochin could cover that area. Jan Horvath on the bench, he is someone that we can play at right back instead of Vochin. So to be fair, not quite as bad in defensive midfield as you might think, but centre back in particular is a concern going into this game. Andrew Pittman is a decent option there. Of course, quite a tall left back, so we can play him there if we need to and bring Ryan on in place of a struggling centre back or someone who is on a yellow card. But hopefully things go well at the back today, albeit that will be easier said than done as we take on a good Bayern Munich team going with a 4-2-3-1 to be fair. Some quite big names in that team, in the likes of Ali Wahi as well as Jamal Musiala. But we get the action underway here at home and hopefully can do a decent job against the current team on top of the Bundesliga. Of course, last season they only won the Super Cup. We were beaten to the Bundesliga title by Borussia Dortmund, and of course we knocked them off in that DFB Pokal final, so they are probably looking for a bit of revenge on us this season, but they did get that nice and early into the Bundesliga season, and coming up to the 20-minute mark, they are on the attack in the first highlight of this game. But good work from us there to get the ball and try and do something here on the counter-attack. Matthias Tell against his former team does get a shot off, but that does take a pretty big deflection, falls into the hands of Costa in goal. Not much of a highlight, that one, but about halfway through the first half so far, this has been a pretty even game. To be fair, I'll probably take a draw from this one, even though it is at home, being against Bayern Munich and all, but we'll see what does happen over the remainder of this game. Joshua Kimmich, he picks up a yellow card, but so far, it's fair to say this one has not been up to much, as you might expect with a game where we do take on the best team, it's fair to say, in Germany, even though they did struggle last season. The only highlight was that chance to Matthias Tell in that first half. Still 0-0 going into halftime. They do have a slightly higher XG and have got more shots off, but we haven't seen any of those. So things going reasonably well here. We'll tell the guys we have to be a bit better in front of goal. Also just make sure that we do ease those concerns from Camillo, but everyone out there is on a decent rating, so I think we'll leave things the way they are going in to the second half. As I said, a point from this game would not be the worst, but hopefully we can keep up our decent goal scoring form, albeit as I say that, free kick here to Bayern Munich. Thankfully, we head that one away now. Amadori had a chance to win that one back. It falls nicely for Simakan just outside the box, but thankfully that shot goes comfortably over the bar. And coming up to the hour mark, Andrew Pittman does pick up a yellow card. Will play things safe, even though he is kind of our centre-back backup in this game. Ryan can come on in his place. There'll be our first substitution, a half hour left, and it is still locked up at 0-0. But so far, the shooting from both teams has not been good at all off the back of that. Now, Sika picks up a yellow card. Jan Horvath can come on for him. Also, Escobar and Matthias Tell are down to red hearts. We do have Baker on the bench who can come on for Escobar, and also Tunde Musa will come on in place of Matthias Tell, only going fairly there against this former team. We make our way now towards the last 20 minutes of this game, and now it's a corner here in our favour. Can we pick out Amadori at that far post like we did in that previous game against Borussia Mönchengladbach? He hits the post. Blomeyer had a chance to put that one in, but thankfully didn't try to, and even then it gets called for offside. So a good chance there for Amadori, the closest that any teams come to scoring in this game, but unfortunately still locked up at 0-0. Now just checking here on some player fitness. With 15 minutes left, there's quite a few players here who are down 2 red hearts. The player on the lowest rating is Justin Blomeyer, but of course don't really have an option now in terms of a ball-winning midfielder on the bench unless we play Vochin there. So I think maybe we look to take off Mastis or Spasajevic, and seeing as he is a new player at the club, we may as well bring on Spalyak in place of Mastis. Hopefully can go a bit better than he did in that previous game, but shortly off the back of that final sub, it's a free kick to Bayern Munich, and they now also hit the post. Theirs from a free kick. Upamecano strikes that crossbar, so that's now pretty similar chances to both teams in this game. Still looking here to get on the attack. Our Bayern, we give away a free kick though there in a dangerous spot. Hopefully this doesn't prove too costly. Diaz is going to line this one up. Hopefully Sun has a position well enough to potentially make a save from this one. That also comes off the post with a couple of good chances there for Bayern. Thankfully this time the woodwork saves us, unlike earlier in the second half when Amadori struck it. Still 0-0, about to make our way late into this game. We might just chuck here Spalyak on attack if we get time to, but I think that's all we're going to do because, as I said, a draw against Bayern Munich, certainly not too bad of a result, but to be fair, that was a pretty average game to watch in terms of the match engine. Our best chance came from Amadori off the back of that Bayern Munich with some good chances late, but thankfully they also hit the woodwork, so that was a rather forgettable game against Bayern Munich, but thankfully we walk away with a point, not a bad bounce back from that first defeat in quite a while to Borussia Mönchengladbach, and hopefully that will also be enough to make sure we can keep ourselves in one of those European spots. There you can see it does. We are back up to 5th and in a Europa League qualifying spot, but that was a rather forgettable game, but we somewhat get back on track, picking up a point at home against Bayern Munich, even though it was just a 0-0 draw. So a bit of a so-so episode today in terms of the on-field action. We kind of stuffed things up against Borussia Mönchengladbach, blowing a 1-0 lead and losing 2-1. Then a game against Bayern Munich, which was rather forgetful. Both teams lost some chances in the second half, which did come off the crossbar. But as I said, a 0-0 draw, a point from that game, not too bad, especially when you look at those stats. Bayern Munich did have twice the amount of shots than us, and also, of course, we were dealing with a couple of injuries and suspensions during both those games, and they were tricky ones considering the results that we did pick up at the start of it this season, but still feel like that Gegenpress is doing a decent job, still in 5th on the Bundesliga table, and hopefully we can get back on track in our next couple of games. So that will do it for today, those 2 games, and also a new signing at right wing, which was kind of a good idea in the end with that injury, which Leroy Sané did pick up, as well as, of course, him announcing he is retiring come the end of this season. If you enjoyed that in today's episode, then do remember to go down below, leave a thumbs up on the video, and if you haven't done so already and have been enjoying the series here on the channel, also consider hitting that subscribe button and turning that notification bell on as well. We'll come back tomorrow. I think I'm going to play a couple of games off camera and wrap up the league phase of the Europa League. If there's a bit riding on that Anderlecht game, we could come back for that one, but I think at this stage we should definitely be in the knockouts in some form of that competition, so we can tell you guys if we will go straight through to the round of 16, or probably more likely might end up in that first knockout round, but we might come back off the back of that Anderlecht game. And also next up we play Qarabag in the Europa League. That does look like a very winnable game, albeit those guys actually not doing too bad in 13th on the table. To be fair, those games could be a bit more tricky than I anticipate. We'll take on those 2 teams, and also Hoffenheim struggling just a little bit more than they have the last couple of seasons in the Bundesliga, and I don't think with that signing that we've already made, we're going to do too much around transfer deadline day. So we'll come back, can update you guys on what happens in the remainder of the month of January. But coming up at the start of February, some quite big games in the Bundesliga. We take on Schalke, those guys in 7th, just behind us in the race for European football, and also Wolfsburg, who are just above us, up in 3rd on the table. Those could be some quite big games. If we can pick up points there, that should put us in a strong position to get European football through our league position. So all things going well, we'll come back for those 2 games in tomorrow's episode, and maybe have an update on what our path looks like to potentially lifting the Europa League come the end of this season. But until tomorrow, for probably Schalke and Wolfsburg, thank you very much for watching. Keep on keeping on, and I'll see you then. Cheers.
Thought I could do this, left through the sadness. Don't know how